Maybe my screen sharing didn't take.
Okay.
Bingo.
Now, Bill.
Bingo.
Okay. So the recording going. So yeah, my name's Bill Hanna. I lived in Australia many years, but retired 9 years ago and moved to Columbia Falls, Montana, which, as it happens, is considered the sixth cloudiest spot in the continental US. So there was no point in doing occultations here. So I set up a remote system in Australia. So quickly, I'll review the equipment. I've gone over this in great detail in a different presentation. I'll show the spreadsheet that I have put together for virtually all of my collections with a first light on my system not quite 6 years ago, and then some interesting statistics based on that 6 years of data. Oops. Okay, so my equipment is a 20-inch plane wave on a Paramount ME2 QHY 174M GPS camera. And the result of all that is I have a field of view, very roughly 17 by 11 arc minutes. And what that looks like is this. And what's important to a much later slide is you notice the wall in the background is basically east of the telescope, and that's going to figure in the minimum star elevation I have when looking to the east. So if I look at the number of collections that I schedule, because I run Occult Watcher, make my own predictions, and in February of 21, the Gaia 16 EDR3 data became available, and you can see there's a marked increase in the number of scheduled detections. Some of the up and down is the result. I have occasionally, we take trips, so I have equipment that I can take with me, but based on the smaller laptop that I take with me and whatever the internet speed in the hotel I'm in, makes it sometimes difficult, if not impossible, to collect. But I'm up in the averaging over 2 per day, more or less. And I've shown this slide in the past, but I had to, based on more experience, I've brought the level down by a factor of 2. But so you can see with the sort of dim target stars that were added by the Gaia 16 data, roughly in the range, the additional data between mag 14 and 16, I'm looking at only 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 frames per second, which has led to the problems that Dave Galt referred to earlier. Oh, and by the way, Dave, I have a number more coming at you. So I've broadly taken statistics from my spreadsheet into 5 categories. Positives and negatives are explanatory. I'm affected by weather partly because I don't control the roof of the observatory. So cloud and rain and wind and humidity and how bright the sky is factor into the automated roof closure algorithm. And unless I have a really high priority event, I just let the automatic system do its thing. But I just had one this morning that I notified my host. My sun elevation was -9 degrees, so very bright sky. Fortunately, I had a bright star, so I fight that. Sometimes there's technical issues. I have a loss of connection between my laptop here in Montana and the telescope itself in Australia. There's a lot of places where the connection can go wrong. I've used several connection protocols over the years. I am not, frankly, very happy with any of them, uh, but it's what it is. You can have a lot of hardware faults. The QHY 174M GPS camera has a well-known problem with the connector to the GPS antenna, and every so often I have to have Martin go out and tweak the connection, and every so often a cable comes loose or whatever, um, and sometimes the roof is closed when I would prefer it to be open. All the other 6 instruments in the observatory are all imaging. I'm the only one doing occultation timing. So my requirements, I don't care what the sky looks like as long as it's clear right where I'm looking, but the automatic system is looking at the whole sky and frequently closes the roof when I probably would not have myself. And then as a final category, sometimes it's just me. It's been a while since I slept through an observation, but it does happen. Sometimes I select an event that, frankly, I really shouldn't have because the likelihood of getting a result was low. And at my age, every so often I go to the doctor, so there could be personal issues. All right, so here's a piece from the spreadsheet. I had to cut it into 2 parts to make it all fit. So I have the object name and the results. Green is obviously positive, red is a miss. Something other than that is some other non-category. But I collect all the data that you get from your Occult Watcher output, uh, the catalog and star number, prediction date and time, rank and probability, target star azimuth and elevation, object magnitude, the expected drop. And then I say, well, based on the time and the plus and minus stuff, this blue column is the minimum time that I would plan to observe, but I extend that typically by 10 diameters, just to make sure that I'm going to catch a moon or a satellite if there is one, although what Dave just said is 4 might be good enough for that. But also based on what Dave has said is I might need to adjust this based on the reasonable number of frames per second to ensure that I have at least 100 frames of data that in case I have a single frame event, to make the probability of certainty higher or lower, depending, I guess. So then I ultimately have a number of frames per second, image size. This is the standard full frame of a QHY camera. Uh, there is an 8-bit mode. I haven't really used it much at all, except in the first year or so. So what it ends up being in the universal time is the to and from and to times indication of maybe whether there's going to be some sunlight involved. And then important to my host is I give him the times that I want the roof to be open based on all the other information. So my overall success rate, and this is for over 3,400 events, half of my observations are affected by weather. Some days I wonder what I'm paying him for. But uh, so misses, positives, weather, the technical, and the mea culpa categories. But what's important is basically half of them are not happening. But, and as Dave pointed out earlier, I do have a positive rate of about 25%. So 1 in 4 observations that actually result in a report are a positive. And then the Gaia 16 EDR provided data below from 14 to 16 roughly, in addition to previous catalogs. So you can see there's kind of increase in the number of events in that 14 to 16 range. So this is sort of what Gaia 16 gave me. Anything less than 16 is probably a result of like a lucky star or a Rio event or something that would not have been found in Occult Watcher because it's dimmer than the star catalogs in use. And every so often you get some bright stars, but not too many. And then I find this one interesting. This is positive or negative based on the horizon's probability of over 1,200 events. You really only get an absolute, dare I use the word, sure thing if the predicted probability is greater than 95%. What's important is even when it's less than 5%, there are a handful of positives. And similarly, even when it's the probability is very high, you still get some misses. So my advice to new observers is don't give up just because the probability is low, but don't be so terribly surprised if you still have a miss for a high probability event. And then what I find to be one of the most interesting statistics, this is the elevation and azimuth of all of the over 3,500 target stars. And there's just an astounding gap, nearly 80 degrees wide around due south. Now, obviously, the main belt asteroids are going to be in a certain part of the sky. So even for the handful of events that are around south, they're at relatively high elevation above the horizon. So if you wanted to be a hero and find some asteroid that's going to come hit the Earth, and you're doing astrometry, you might want to, look down in this area a little bit. So that was just kind of a very quick summary. And some days you just have to call in the professionals.
Very good. Any questions for Bill? Yes, here's one coming.
Hi, Bill. It's Renato.
Hello, Renato.
How are you doing? Yeah, thank you very much for your talk. How can you get such a high number of observations per day? When I look at my Occult Watcher online, I had a look for the next few months, and for my location at home, there's absolutely nothing for the next 3 months.
Well, I run the occult program down to basically the limit of the Gaia 16 data. So many of my events are of low, as you saw on the other slide, of low magnitude, and there's obviously far more of them at the lower magnitudes. I am trying to unshare my screen.
You got your screen.
Trying. I don't know what's going to happen if I close this window.
You don't need to close the window. You can just click on a slide and you'll see it.
Usually down here at the bottom, there's a. Oh,
You just need
here
to
we go.
click on a slide and we should be able to see it.
So, oops, no. Pause share. Stop sharing. There we go.
Yes, I'm just curious, Bill, what is your workflow there from occult to occult watcher?
I do predictions basically 5 days at a time. I get roughly 250 per day in a prediction. So a 5-day prediction is, 12 to 1500. You do occult as you do it, and then you choose the make horizons data. It selects the horizons data for those particular 1200 or so, then reprocess it using the user database, which then in effect gives you the horizons prediction for all of those. Sort it by probability. I start by collecting or by choosing the top, anything above a probability of say 10% or so. That usually works out in a 5-day period to roughly 30, give or take. I then also go in and look specifically for long duration events, because even with a low magnitude, if it's a 30-second event, that is worth going after. And I also look for the magnitude of the target star. And I have a rule of thumb, which is you don't let a bright star go to waste. So, and then I also, as I'm going through and looking at the place on the Earth where the track is going to be, I look and I say, well, we have the Canberra cluster, which is me and Dave Harold and John Newman. You have the Sydney cluster with Dave and Peter and Tony. You have the sort of Brisbane cluster with John's. We have you up in North Queensland. We have Peter and Doug in Melbourne. So I look to see if there's a chance that somebody else could see the event. But having said that, if you're looking mostly now for relatively small events, Dave Harold and I are not terribly far apart, but a 4-kilometer asteroid could pass right between us. So I think that the likelihood of not going mobile and catching a tiny event with more than one chord is basically zero, unless it just happens to align right on the line of, me and Dave.
Very good. Any other questions? No online questions? I think we're a bit over.
Not too bad.
No, it's all good. I think we restart at 15:20 AEDT. That's 20 minutes time. Tim Holt, are you out there?
Yep, I'm all good to go.
Okay, cool. 20 minutes.
20 minutes is good.
Any questions for Dave? I had a question for Dave Harold before he ran away about his satellites. The Rita case, it strikes me that you talk about an implausibility of an orbit. It strikes me that there's a grey zone between a satellite and a contact binary and a big lump on the side of the thing. And that there's not really a distinction between them. Is Rita in that grey zone, or is there reasons for the grey zone to not exist?
Good question. In all of this, how do I? Firstly, put some context in all these asteroidal satellites. The vast majority have been discovered by photometric means, like the light curve I showed you. that one event. And I know an important professional on the occultation side is fairly skeptical, cynical about the realities of an awful lot of those discoveries. And then you got the question, if it's a contact binary, is it really a binary? That's a matter of semantics in there. Do we know? I guess the situation there is that if we ask the question, is that definitely a satellite? The evidence is not good